Battle Box or Fort Canning bunker was built in 1936 to serve the headquarters of the British Strategic Command as the nerve centre for British military operations in the Far East during World War II. Sited below the old fort gate, the underground labyrinth is 9 meters deep and had 30 rooms. Soldiers nicknamed the bunker the Battle Box, but the only battle fought here was the decision for surrender to the Japanese. The decision to surrender was made as the alternative to counterattack was considered impracticable. Some of the major concerns that swayed the decision included the perceived shortage of water in Singapore, especially with the influx of refugees from the peninsula.
This gate and the adjoining wall you see behind me are what remains of a fort that was built on this hill between 1859 and 1861. The hill, previously known as Government Hill, was then renamed Fort Canning Hill after Lord Charles John Canning, the Governor-General of India. Fort Canning was actually part of a series of 19th century fortifications, and in 1861 this fort actually had 7 68-pounder guns, 8 8-inch guns, 2 13-inch mortars, and some 14-pounder cannons. The fort buildings include barracks for Indian and European soldiers, a hospital, and gunpowder magazine.
The main battery of the guns which defended Singapore in the 19th century was erected in this area. In 1867, there were 7 guns of 68-pounder size mounted behind a brick wall. Within the wall were buildings to store gunpowder. The guns were mounted on carriages which could be pivoted to enable the guns to cover a wide arc of fire. Due to the peaceful conditions of the late 19th and early 20th century, the guns were never used against an enemy. The only time they were ever fired was to salute important visitors and to signal the time of the day.
The weaponry that Singapore possesses at that time was considered inappropriate for the situation. It was a common misconception that the south-facing large-caliber naval cannons in Singapore could not be turned around to face north. In fact, most of the guns could be turned and were indeed fired at the invaders. However, the cannons are only loaded with armor-piercing rounds and not high explosives. This has rendered the cannon useless against the Japanese, which uses conscript but not tanks. The cannons are also seen as statically situated artillery that poses no threat to the Japanese army. The Japanese high-mobility troop uses bicycles for movement during the invasion to overcome the stationary rounds that were fired at them. The strategies used by the Allied forces were also mainly flawed. They had incorrectly predicted that the Japanese would land forces on the northeast side of Singapore. This was encouraged by the deliberate movement of the enemy troops to deceive the British. Therefore, a large portion of defence equipment and resources was allocated to the northeastern sector. There was totally no fixed defence work or obstacle in the northwest side. After the discovery of troops from the northwest sector, requests for immediate shielding of this area was sent. However, it was ignored by the Allied forces as they deemed the real assault would come from the northeastern sector but not the northwest. The poor leadership and decision-making of the Allied forces has made the defending of Singapore almost impossible.
So, after the brief discussion of the battle tactics of the British and the fall of Singapore, there are 3 key lessons to take away.
The first one is that we should not be complacent and underestimate the enemy. The British were confident of defending Singapore with their forces, thinking that the Japanese troops were weak, and thus they were ill-prepared and anticipating a predictable attack from the sea.
The second lesson is to be adaptable and prepared. The Japanese were highly effective in their offense because they were well prepared with one-man tanks and bicycles and thus were also unpredictable in their attack.
The third lesson is that we should be self-reliant. The British did not put the defense of Singapore as their priority as they were more focused on their war efforts in Europe.
With this, we shall conclude the video on Fort Canning and we hope that you have gained a deeper understanding about the history of Singapore. Thank you.